Video games are a great way to kick back and relax, but sometimes we're not looking for quite such a tranquil experience. Sometimes we want a game to push us to our very limits, battering us with insane difficulty levels and brutal challenges that are maddening in the moment and oh so satisfying once we finally complete them. If you're an Xbox Game Pass member in search of a worthy opponent, these games are sure to put your skills to the test.
The premise of the Doom games has always been pretty metal, with the player taking control of a badass space marine going it alone against the forces of hell. But the third entry really leans into the nightmarish quality of the premise. While you're still a swaggering super soldier ready to reduce your enemies to demonic mulch in the flick of a trigger finger, a tangible sense of dread permeates Doom 3. The game takes place on a dark, dingy industrial facility on Mars, which looks like it was probably a pretty awful place to be, even before they accidentally opened a portal to the underworld and the whole joint was overrun with hellbeasts. It's also the perfect setting to push the series ever so slightly towards the survival horror genre. You'll need to watch your ammo a little more carefully, rather than just launching hot plasma at anything that wriggles. Combined with some incredibly grungy visuals and wonderfully unsettling sound design, Doom 3 is a nightmare of a game in the best possible way.
The original Battletoads is still spoken about in hushed whispers by those who sprain their thumbs trying to survive in the classic 90s beat-em-up, and the latest reboot does its legacy proud. Once again playing as a trio of amphibians with attitude, this 2D side-scroller has you smashing your way through lumberjack tribes, deadly gymnasts, and Hollywood big shots on a quest to become famous. The vivacious graphics and the blistering rock soundtrack all perfectly capture the feel of a retro cartoon, while the banter that Pimple, Zitz, and Rash fire off between blows is hilarious. And you might find yourself in need of a good laugh too. The reboot blesses us with a merciful difficulty slider which allows you to play on Tadpole or Toad if you're not looking to be immediately crushed underfoot. But if your masochistic side has been waiting for a challenge as punishing as the original game, slam the dial up to Battletoad and get ready for it to bring the pain. Just don't say you weren't warned.
In any list of hard as nails games, the term Souls-like is going to come up a lot. From Software really have managed to make themselves synonymous with soul-crushing difficulty, and we honestly can't wait for them to brutalize us all over again with Elden Ring come February. Until then, The Surge 2 makes for a fantastic sci-fi spin on the Souls formula. Like the first Surge game, this third-person action RPG takes place in a grim future, in which the human race is now seriously lacking in vital resources. On the other hand, they are well stocked in the killer robot and weirdo cultist departments, so I guess it's not all that bad. Even though you get to play as a mech suit wearing warrior who can be outfitted with all kinds of deadly gear, just surviving in the Surge 2 is a constant challenge, requiring rapid reflexes, precise timing, and if all else fails, a whole lot of luck.
The mainline Dirt games are more than happy to accommodate learning drivers, with plenty of tools in place to ensure that everyone has a good time once they hit the road. The rally titles, on the other hand, are really for speed freaks who aren't truly happy unless they're barreling along a cragged road at 100 miles an hour, knowing that the slightest error will send them spiraling out of control and into last place. Dirt Rally 2.0 is kind enough to provide you with a difficulty slider so you can take the sting out of those early races a little. Still, the game's hefty, realistic physics, aggressive AI, and general lack of tutorials mean there are no easy rides to be had here. And there are no shortcuts to success either. You'll just have to press through the failures, learning the finer points of the maps and improving your wheelman skills with each devastating defeat. Aww.
There's already a lot of really good reasons to care about climate change, but here's another. What if the polar ice caps actually contain an alien virus that causes all life on Earth to mutate into hideous monsters? That's the premise of Phoenix Point, an XCOM-style strategy game where it's your job to defend humanity from the Lovecraftian horrors that the virus has unleashed upon the world. And it's the nature of the enemies that make Phoenix Point a real brainbuster, even for seasoned XCOM pros. The aliens you encounter are procedurally generated and mutate over time, drawing on the DNA pools of whatever corner of the world they happen to be in. So if you're fighting the good fight on the plains of Africa, expect to come face to face with some lion-headed bad guys. Given that they can also absorb human technology to mutate even further, you can expect this game to constantly make a mockery out of even your cleverest strategies.
If you've spent any amount of time playing the Soulsborne games, there's probably been at least one moment where you thought, man, if I had a machine gun, this would all be so much easier. The good news is that Remnant from the Ashes lets you test out that theory, although you might not love the results. Set in a post-apocalyptic world where an evil entity called the Root has taken over, this action RPG is ready to go medieval on you, no matter how much firepower you're toting. Thanks to the procedurally generated maps, you'll never know quite what to expect either, only that there's sure to be a great, big, very frightening boss battle at the end of it. At the very least, Xbox Series X and S players will be able to call on a 60 FPS frame rate to help them out in the thick of combat. Though, to be honest, that will mostly make for some smoother, more fluid animations of you getting clobbered.
Another game which constantly looks to wrong-foot you with its procedurally generated levels is the heavily armed roguelike Enter the Gungeon. This old-school bullet hell shooter has you making your way through a series of dungeons, taking out enemies and picking up treasure as you go. On the one hand, the game offers you 300 different types of firearms for you to go to town with. On the other hand, since you are in a dungeon made of guns, fighting gun-toting enemies who themselves are often made of guns, this doesn't feel like as much of an advantage as you might have imagined. Boasting fast, frantic combat and near endless variety of dungeons to keep you on your toes, Enter the Gungeon is guaranteed to blast you into pieces and have you coming back for more.
Anyone who has watched the original Alien movie will know that any encounter between a human and a xenomorph is heavily slanted in favour of the many-mouthed wall crawler. And in Alien Isolation, you'll learn firsthand just how difficult it is to avoid becoming a space snack. Isolation has you crawling through an abandoned space station as the alien hunts you from the shadows. Never being exactly sure where it's going to come leaping out from next is utterly nerve-wracking, all the more so because the xenomorph's devious AI will quickly begin to recognize patterns in your play and begin turning them against you. Bunch of sadists that they are, the devs even added in a nightmare mode, which strips you of your UI, drastically reduces the resources you'll have to work with, and even makes all the other humans a bit testier for good measure.
Code Vein is another Souls-like that's sure to test the durability of your controller, and one which puts a stylish anime spin on the whole thing. The premise is simple: humankind found itself thoroughly outmatched by the monsters which had suddenly started popping up all over the place. So they used some questionable technology to reanimate a bunch of corpses and turn them into vampiric superpowered warriors called Revenants. Okay, actually that isn't simple at all, but it is a great premise for an action RPG as you wander the world, battling bad guys and slowly improving your skills. Like any Souls-ish game, combat here is finely tuned and incredibly punishing, so that the slightest misstep can send you scurrying back to the last checkpoint. But once you get the hang of it, the game's enchanting anime art style will make your victories look even sweeter.
To finish things off, we'll return to a true Xbox OG, the excellent Halo 2, which you can play in its beautifully scrubbed up remaster as part of the Master Chief Collection. For Series X owners, that means gorgeous 4K graphics and an eye-watering 120 FPS frame rate. Halo 2's campaign somehow managed to up the ante on the original game, putting together a series of stunning set pieces, introducing all kinds of ferocious new enemies, and even giving the player a new protagonist to play with in the form of the Arbiter. And it didn't shy away from challenging the player either. After all, who said saving the entire human race was going to be easy? But where things get really intense is in the game's legendary difficulty mode. All of a sudden, common grunts are soaking up bullets like nobody's business, forcing you to pick your shots against even the most basic enemies. And then there are those loathsome, deadly jackal snipers, capable of picking you off in an instant from practically the other side of the map. Some of us have been cursing those dastardly marksmen under our breath since 2004, and if you want to understand why, just give Legendary Mode a go.
Of course, it's important to remember that none of these games are actually designed to reduce you to a crumbled heap of human misery on the floor. They're supposed to be fun, so enjoy the challenge, revel in your hard-earned victories, and maybe have something chill downloaded alongside them to help you wind down afterwards. For more recommendations, tips and news, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. And if you felt like hitting like before you left, that would be awesome. Bye!